This is a, well, you tell me, what is this a map of? It's always entertaining how people suspect a trick. Yeah. What do you suspect this is a map of? All right, we want topography. How about an easier answer? Yeah, thank you. Right, the United States. Good, good. This is a map of the United States made by the Raven Map Company, a company that prides itself on making both beautiful and accurate maps. Beautiful and accurate maps. How do you know this is a map of the United States? Yeah, the shape. Have you ever stood somewhere and seen this? Somebody else to say yes? No. Has anybody stood anywhere and seen this? I'm sorry? Space station. People say that. People say that. And that's a good first thought. I mean, that's what I thought too when I started to read about things like this. So an astronaut, somebody way up there, maybe Martians, whatever, guys in the space lab. Except, first of all, as you can maybe tell, you can see the crease in the book, unfortunately. These were fast scans. This is a two-dimensional image. And obviously, if you look back from the space station or from the moon, you won't see the Earth laid out flat like this. Also, if I'd given you more time and not forced an answer so quickly, you would have thought that, of course, this map is color-coded. You're not going to look back at the Earth and find it neatly color-coded to illustrate rainfall, right? It's not that the east is green and the west is brown so neatly. And even if it were one day, these colors, it would be very unlikely that there would ever be a moment when there were no clouds over the United States, right? There's not a cloud to be had here. Now, I know you can't see it because the image is too small and too far away, but also the outlines of the states are on this map, and the names of the states and major cities, however major is determined, are also indicated here. What's missing if this is a map of the United States? Alaska and Hawaii. Why do you think they're not here? Yeah, right, everybody's knocking around this answer somewhere. Yeah, basically they don't fit, which is, a really terrific. If a student came to you, right, or if as a student, you turn in a paper and you say, oh yeah, I stopped after 3 pages, and your teacher says there's a 10-page assignment. Yeah, I only had 3 pieces of paper. You'd say, this is not a valid response to the assignment. Well, here's the assignment to map the United States. We don't have Alaska and Hawaii here because they don't fit, right? Terrible answer. And if you happen to live in Alaska and Hawaii, this annoys you every time you see a map like this, right? Because you're a part of the United States. So it's not a politically defined map. As somebody said, a couple of people said, it's a map of the contiguous United States, which basically is a reminder to us that those other states are way off somewhere that we can barely see. Sarah Palin, we know, is right on the edge of Russia, right? Over there, yeah? Up there to the upper left. There are 2 ways that cartographers often deal with this problem. Either they have separate maps of Alaska and Hawaii, often to a different scale, because Hawaii is relatively small and over a large mass of water, and Alaska, of course, is enormous. So they're often drawn at a different scale than the rest of the states. Or they're insets, also always at a different scale, set within the map, the contiguous map of the United States. So they're tucked away in the corners somehow here. It's an interesting way to deal with the problem. But if you were ever to think that this is a merely accurate or merely objective kind of map, you realize there's no such thing, right? That it necessarily has to make some difficult decisions. If it were to try to include Alaska and Hawaii at scale, the piece of paper it would have to be on would be pretty enormous. And either it would have to indicate what's in between, but omit those things, right? So maybe just outlines, or do what has happened here. What happened to Canada? What happened to Mexico? They don't exist. The ocean doesn't exist, right? The waters belong to us, or at least they're ours to do certain things in and with, but they're not here. So this is a map of part of the landmass of the United States represented in a particular way. There's a note on the map that says that it represents features of interest to the general reader. Who's that? Who's that? Who gets to decide? Which are the major cities? Maps always have some sort of bias. The map is to an intellectual construct. No one has ever seen this thing. Not this map, of course, you've seen it. But no one has ever stood anywhere and seen this thing in life. It's a representation of something we're all, I think, willing to believe exists. In that sense, it's an intellectual construct, and it is also what the science fiction writer William Gibson calls a consensual hallucination. That's how he described the internet. We can't touch it, we can't grab a hold of it, we can't go visit it, we use it all the time, and we believe it exists, right? It's just out there somewhere. I'm going to read just a couple other small bits, then some more pictures. Words can never be a simple reflection of life. Our very limited set of symbols, the letters of our alphabet, are forced to translate the unspeakable data of our senses, our thoughts, and our emotions. This is why it's important for all of us realists, realistic writers, damned by that word conventional, to remember always that we've chosen a particular projection, one that seems to us to minimize distortion and to speak powerfully. This is our choice, and simply to learn how others have done it, to pick up the graph paper and begin plotting our points, limits us from the start. Realism, like every other artistic endeavor, fails when it becomes an exercise in filling in the blanks. Realism succeeds when the author remembers to question his or her assumptions. Why do we represent dialogue the way we do? Why are smells so often absent? What is the relation of chronology to the way we think? What are we doing when we imagine a character's consciousness, the flow of thoughts through her head, and then render them on the page in some particular order in a particular syntax? How are we manipulating the data? To what ends? The same, of course, holds true for surrealists, experimentalists, modernists, postmodernists, and romantics. All of our approaches are possible projections. How to choose? Dennis Woods, a critical cartographer, asks, this is the question, for the answer determines the way the Earth will look on the map. The selection of a map projection is always to choose among competing interests, to take a point of view. If no map is objective, we must reconsider what we mean when we ask if a map is accurate. Under the most rigorous examination, no map is accurate. On the other hand, you can probably draw on a scrap of paper what's called a sketch map, sufficiently accurate to guide a new colleague from your workplace to your home. Accuracy then has to be judged against the map's stated purpose. In the case of a piece of writing, we can determine accuracy in light of implicit intention. If the piece of writing you're doing is a grocery list and you hand it to your spouse, say, and the spouse can go to the grocery store and come home with the right things, it's accurate. That's good, right? It may not be detailed. It may just say eggs. You don't have to say large eggs because you guys have been eating large eggs for 25 years, but that's enough. If you give the same list to a stranger, who knows what you'll get? If you give it to me, good luck. Dennis Wood argues that maps give us a reality that exceeds our vision, our reach, the span of our days, a reality we achieve in no other way. We are always mapping the invisible or the unattainable, the future or the past. He adds that through the map, through a map, we link all of our elaborately constructed knowledge up with our living. The conventions of fiction are invisible to most readers. We write in sentences and paragraphs. We typically follow the standard grammatical and mechanical usage of contemporary written English. We begin sentences with uppercase letters, begin paragraphs with indentations. We name significant characters, leaving others anonymous. We describe the physical appearance of our fictitious people. We obligingly give them some sort of trouble, and we bring that trouble or some part of it to resolution. We assume the reader will be able to distinguish between a first-person narrative relayed by a fictional character and a first-person addressed by the author, between fiction and nonfiction, for instance. Such was not always the case. Among discarded conventions is the quaint introductory paragraph telling the reader that he is reading a piece of fiction, or pretending that the manuscript of the story about to begin was found in a bottle or in an old trunk. When we think of conventions of content in fiction, we might think first of genre writing. Fans of science fiction, fantasy, horror, romance, and Western novels can explain in detail what the books they enjoy do and don't include, the rules those books agree to share. Fans of mysteries, among others, can identify any number of subgenres. Procedurals and whodunits and courtroom dramas all have their own established methods of operation, and anyone writing such a novel had better be aware of them. This is not to say such novels are identical any more than all sonnets are identical. And Louis L'Amour's Westerns, not so far removed from the dime novels of a century earlier, can be found in the same bookstores as James Michener's popular historical novels, Larry McMurtry's and Cormac McCarthy's modern Westerns, and Robert Coover's parody of the genre's cliches in Ghost Town. These books, each insisting on its own reality, coexist, and while they may appeal to different audiences, those audiences overlap, so any one reader can and does accept different rules for each book he or she opens. No matter whether we adhere to or dispense with convention, we're engaged in silent conversation with the reader about our choices.